Hey everyone, Mr. Dennis here. Welcome to lesson 15 of the investigation project. The do now was, who is the secondary stakeholder in your issue? So the reason I got you to do this is so you can begin the process of really zoning in on what you're focusing for in today's lesson, which is the second group of people or the second person that is most affected by your issue. Last lesson, we looked at the primary stakeholder, so the people that were most affected. And today it's the secondary stakeholders. So my example one that I'm working through with you, Adam Goods is the primary stakeholder. And as you'll see in this lesson, the secondary stakeholder that I identified is the AFL. So the learning intention is to continue drafting your expository essay, and the success criteria are the same as last lesson. You will have understood the stakeholder paragraph, how it's structured, and you will have written a draft of your second main body paragraph, which, as I said, is focused on the secondary stakeholder. So this is the structure that we're working through. We're now up to this part here. So the third paragraph, which is the second of the body paragraphs, and we're going to focus on our secondary stakeholder. And as I said last lesson, you need to do four things. You need to describe how the person or group was affected. You need to explain exactly how they were involved, highlight any evidence you have for this, and explain how your question might be answered from this perspective. Okay. So what I'll do is, as I did last lesson, I'll just quit out of here and I'll go to the example that I've been working through with you, which you now have as a copy of your own, which I shared with you through Google Classroom. So any changes I make to this, you will see in that file. And we're looking at stakeholder number 2 today. So stakeholder number 2, I said, is the AFL. And when I did the research for this, I searched what did the AFL do to protect Adam Goods from being booed. And I also searched the AFL should do more to stop the booing. I really was just trying to see what people thought about the response of the AFL. And I came up with some interesting information. So I found out that the AFL boss, Gillian McLachlan, said that as a game, they should have acted sooner and that he was sorry they acted too slowly. So I thought that was interesting. And the other thing I found was Gillian McLachlan said the league cannot tell its supporters how to behave. So that was the reason why they didn't do anything quicker, because he felt like it wasn't their place to tell adults essentially how to behave. I did find something else out which was interesting, which was that a letter was sent, which was written by the captains of each of the teams in the AFL, which said enough is enough, enjoy the game, celebrate the success, but don't boo, jeer or taunt players because of who they are or what they stand for. So this is something that the AFL did that was really proactive in trying to stop the bullying. Or the booing, sorry. So these are my 2 dot points. As I said last lesson, you're not really going to have more than 2 or 3 dot points for your stakeholders. And these are the 2 things, or 3 as it works out to be, for mine. So the first thing you need to do is you need to describe how the people or the main people of this group were affected. So here I've written the AFL is another group that was involved in this issue. The AFL's response was mixed, with the administration, so that's the board headed by Gillian McLachlan, doing very little, and that the players banded together in support of Goods. Okay, so what I'm trying to illustrate, just in a really simple way, without going into detail, is that there were some people in the AFL who did a lot to help and others who didn't do much to help. Then the next 2 dot points I've got together here, and that's because I'm talking about two different groups within the AFL. So I'm going to explain exactly how Gillon McLachlan was involved and the evidence I have for this, which is this bit here in orange and in green. And then I'm going to explain exactly how the teams were involved, and then the evidence I have here and here, which is why you get this mixture of yellow, yellow, and green. So, in terms of exactly how the administration were involved, I said AFL boss Gillon McLachlan felt it wasn't appropriate for the AFL to tell fans how to behave at a game and initially refused to do anything to get the fans to stop booing. I said initially because they did try and do something later on. Evidence. He did ask the fans to stop, but has since said that he should have taken action, quote, sooner, and regretted that he had moved too slowly. So another one of these asterisks has been placed here. I mentioned this last lesson. This is just a way for me to remember that I'm going to need to come back and put a footnote here, but we'll discuss that in a subsequent lesson. So that is me explaining exactly how Gillon McLachlan and the board responded and evidence of this. Now I'm going to do the same for the team. The individual teams in the AFL took more decisive action to support goods. So I say exactly what they did. Their action was very decisive. And the evidence I have for the fact that they took decisive action was the captains of each team wrote an open letter telling fans to stop booing, saying enough is enough, quote. And again, there's my asterisk to remind me I need to put a footnote there. So when you write your paragraph, there's a good chance you'll just have a bit of yellow or orange and a bit of green. The reason I've got two lots of orange and two lots of green is because, as I said, even though I'm talking about the AFL as the next secondary stakeholder within the AFL, there are two different responses from two different aspects of it. Okay, but for yours, you're likely to just have a section of yellow and then a section of green. The last thing we need to do is explain how your question might be answered from this perspective. So last lesson, we answered the question of whether or not Adam Goodes should have received more protection from his perspective. And now we're going to answer that question from the AFL's perspective. So I've written, when we think about whether more should have been done to protect Adam Goodes, that should say, from the AFL, from the perspective of the AFL, the answer is yes. However, it should be noted that the players made a significant effort to stop the booing with the open letter that they wrote. So I'm saying yes, but there is an exception or an additional piece of information which is important to note, which is that they did try to do something. When I wrote about or answered this question from Adam Goodes' perspective last lesson, I simply said yes. The answer is definitely yes. It is yes here, but we should note that some effort was made by the players of the AFL, and they deserve credit for that. So when you put it all together, it looks like this. We've got that orange and green sort of intermixing here, but it follows that pattern perfectly, all right? And what you need to do is to take these dot points, remember these are the dot points here, and actually write each section of your paragraph under each dot point before putting it together. You'll find that's a really good way to do it. So then when you take the dot points away, you end up with something like this. So my second stakeholder paragraph now reads, the AFL is another group that was involved in the issue. The AFL's response was mixed, with the administration doing very little and the players banding together in support of Goodes. AFL boss Gillon McLachlan felt it wasn't appropriate for the AFL to tell fans how to behave at games and initially refused to do anything to get the fans to stop booing. He did ask fans to stop, but has since said that he should have taken action sooner and regretted that he moved too slowly. The individual teams in the AFL took more decisive action to support Goodes. The captains of each team wrote an open letter to fans to stop booing, saying enough is enough. When we think about whether more should have been done to protect Adam Goodes from the perspective of the AFL, the answer is yes. However, it should be noted that the players made a significant effort to stop the booing with the open letter they wrote. So as you can see, this is not persuasive, it's informative. What we're presenting is another perspective, and we are presenting a logical conclusion based on that perspective. When we get to the concluding paragraph, we'll try and synthesize all of this together, and that's where your unique thinking will come out. But again, it won't feel persuasive. It will just feel like a logical conclusion to reach based on your exploration of the topic. So, your task for today is to try and write the second body paragraph of your expository essay using this example to help you. So you have this now in Google Classroom, and you can use it and adjust the words and sort of use it as a starting point. That's completely appropriate. And I'm available to answer questions as always. So the review and reflect is the same as last lessons, except it's for this paragraph. And the review and reflect, which I would like you to post on MS Teams, is what is the line of your stakeholder to paragraph? Sorry, what is the last line? Okay, so I've done something very similar each time. I've said, when we think about whether more should have been done to protect Adam Goodes from the perspective of the AFL, the answer is yes. When I go up to my previous paragraph, when I say, when we think about whether more should have been done to protect Adam Goodes from booing from his perspective, the answer is yes. So it's perfectly okay to use the same kind of sentence, if not exactly the same sentence, at the end of each of your stakeholder paragraphs. What is important is that the stakeholder is clear, and that the answer you are giving is from their perspective is also clear. Some of the review and reflects that I saw yesterday didn't make it clear who the stakeholder was, which is probably the most important aspect of that. So have a go. If it's not clear how you do that, please put your hand up, or just yell out and I'll come and give you a hand. Okay, so that's it from me. Good luck and work hard.